The underestimated arsenal of the transport shuttle descended through New Terra's atmosphere, carrying visitors who would change everything. Commander Davis Chun stood on the landing platform, watching the alien vessel approach with practiced calm. Behind him, a colony's defense council waited in formal arrangement, their faces carefully neutral. 3 years of building this world, and now the galaxy had finally noticed. The Voltorian shuttle touched down with barely a whisper. The boarding ramp extended, and out stepped beings that looked like they had been carved from living marble. Their skin held a faint luminescence, and their movements carried an elegance that spoke of centuries of genetic refinement. At their head walked High Commander Terex, his ceremonial armor catching the afternoon sun. Chun stepped forward, offering the traditional human greeting. Terex accepted with a slight inclination of his head, though his eyes betrayed amusement at the primitive gesture. "Commander Chun," Terex said, his voice rendered into perfect English by the translation device at his collar. "On behalf of the Voltorian Empire, I bring greetings to your settlement. We have traveled far to meet the species that has ventured into this sector without proper authorization." Chun kept his expression pleasant. New Terra is a registered human colony under the Outer Worlds Charter. We filed all necessary claims with the Galactic Registry. Terex waved a hand dismissively. The registry recognizes claims from established spacefaring civilizations. Humanity has been traveling between stars for what, 50 standard years? You are newcomers. Children playing with tools you barely understand. The words were delivered without malice, simply stating what Terex clearly believed to be fact. Chun felt his jaw tighten, but maintained his diplomatic composure. This meeting had been anticipated, prepared for. The Voltorians controlled 12 solar systems and considered themselves the rightful authority in this region of space. Over the next 3 days, Chun escorted the Voltorian delegation through New Terra's facilities. They toured the agricultural domes, the manufacturing centers, the residential sectors. Terex and his officers observed everything with polite interest, occasionally asking questions that revealed their vast technological superiority. Their empire had mastered technologies humanity could only theorize about. On the 4th day, Terex requested a tour of New Terra's military installations. Chun had expected this. He guided them to Firebase Zenith, one of the colony's primary defense. Positions built into the mountains overlooking the main settlement. The Firebase's command center hummed with activity as duty officers monitored sensor feeds and communication channels. But Terex seemed more interested in the observation deck, where the massive barrel of a railgun installation pointed toward the sky. "This is your primary defense weapon?" Terex asked, walking along the observation window. Below them, the railgun stretched for nearly 200 meters, its electromagnetic coils visible through maintenance panels. "One of several," Chun replied. "We have 15 installations of this class across the colony, plus smaller point defense systems and mobile artillery platforms." Terex studied the weapon with the expression of someone examining a museum exhibit. "Fascinating. You still rely on kinetic projectiles." Solid matter accelerated through magnetic force. He turned to his tactical officer, speaking in their own language. The translation device caught fragments, ancient methodology and industrial age thinking. Chun felt Colonel Sarah Vance stiffen beside him. She commanded New Terra's ground forces and had spent the last year overseeing the installation of these very weapons. Her expertise in ballistics and kinetic warfare was unmatched in the human colonial forces. "These weapons serve our needs effectively," Vance said, her voice level. "Each railgun can accelerate a projectile to 0.03 c. At that velocity, the kinetic energy delivered is considerable." Terex smiled, the expression almost paternal. "Colonel, please understand I mean no disrespect to your engineering capabilities. For a young species, these weapons show impressive craftsmanship. But the galaxy abandoned kinetic weapons millennia ago. Modern warfare is conducted with directed energy systems, plasma weapons, and matter disruptors. Your railguns would be ineffective against any modern military shield system. He gestured to one of his officers, who activated a holographic display. It showed a Valtorian warship, its shields absorbing and deflecting various forms of attack. Our defensive screens can track and intercept thousands of kinetic projectiles per second. They analyze trajectory, calculate impact point, and eliminate threats before they reach the hull. Against energy weapons, the shields disperse heat and electromagnetic radiation across their entire surface. Your kinetic weapons are simply too slow, too predictable. Chun watched Vance's expression carefully. She had designed much of New Terra's defense strategy, and he knew the mockery stung. But she remained professional, even as Terex continued his lecture. In the Empire, we encountered a species called the Drexari about 300 years ago, Terex continued. They also relied heavily on kinetic weapons. Missiles, railguns, even primitive chemical explosives. The war lasted less than a month. Their weapons could not penetrate our shields. They could not track our vessels. They surrendered when they realized continuing the fight would only waste lives. The message was clear. Humanity's weapons were obsolete, their defenses inadequate. The Valtorians held every advantage. That evening, in the colony's council chambers, Terex presented what he called a partnership opportunity. The terms were delivered with diplomatic language, but the underlying message was unmistakable. New Terra would place itself under Valtorian protection. The colony would pay tribute in the form of resources and manufactured goods. Human vessels would be restricted to their immediate system without Valtorian approval. In exchange, the Empire would defend New Terra from other galactic powers and provide access to certain technologies. And if we refuse? Chun asked, though he already knew the answer. Terex's expression remained pleasant. Then you would be making a terrible mistake. The galaxy is dangerous, Commander. There are species far less benevolent than the Valtorians. Without proper protection, an isolated human colony would be extremely vulnerable. Pirates, raiders, or worse. It would be tragic if something happened to your people simply because of stubborn pride. The threat was clear, wrapped in concern. Submit or face the consequences. Chun requested time to consider. Terex granted them 48 hours, his fleet maintaining orbit above the planet. 20 warships, each one capable of reducing the colony to ash from space. A demonstration of power that required no words. That night, Chun, Vance, and the colony's senior leadership gathered in a secured conference room deep beneath the administrative complex. The room was shielded against electronic surveillance, one of many precautions they had taken since first detecting Valtorian ships in their system. They think we are helpless, Vance said, pulling up tactical displays on the room's central screen. They looked at our railguns and saw antiques. They cataloged our defenses and dismissed every installation as inadequate. Chun studied the tactical map showing New Terra's complete defensive network. What the Valtorians had seen during their tour represented perhaps 20% of the colony's actual military capability. The rest remained hidden, powered down and camouflaged among civilian structures and natural terrain. Asterisk, their shields are designed to counter energy weapons, continued Lieutenant Marcus Webb, the colony's chief weapons engineer. Everything in their tactical doctrine assumes directed energy as the primary threat. Kinetic weapons are considered obsolete because modern shields can track and destroy them. But their tracking systems have limitations, Vance added. They demonstrated their technology quite thoroughly, perhaps too thoroughly. Their shields can intercept thousands of projectiles per second, but those calculations assume missiles and conventional artillery shells. Objects traveling at relatively modest velocities with predictable trajectories. Chun leaned forward. And our weapons? Webb activated another display, showing specifications that made several council members inhale sharply. The railguns they saw are standard installations. What they didn't see are the hypervelocity systems we have been developing for the past 3 years. Project Hammerfall. The screen showed weapons platforms hidden in polar regions, disguised mining facilities, and underground silos. Each installation housed mass accelerators capable of accelerating projectiles far beyond what the Valtorians had observed. 0.15 C, Webb stated. 15% of light speed. At that velocity, even a small projectile carries enough kinetic energy to punch through any known shield system. The Valtorians' shields are designed to track relatively slow objects and destroy them with point defense lasers. But tracking something at 15% light speed requires entirely different computational systems. And they don't have those systems because they don't need them, Vance finished. No one uses kinetic weapons at relativistic speeds. The engineering challenges are immense. Heat dissipation alone would destroy most weapon systems. Would destroy most systems, Chun repeated, understanding. But not ours. Webb nodded. We solved the thermal problems using distributed heat sink networks and exotic matter cooling systems. Each hypervelocity railgun can fire sustained bursts without overheating. And we have been stockpiling ammunition for months. Solid tungsten carbide penetrators, each one precision manufactured to tolerate the acceleration forces. Chun looked around the room at his leadership team. These people had built new Terra from bare rock. They had solved impossible engineering problems, created functioning societies from nothing, and never once assumed the galaxy would welcome them kindly. Humanity had learned hard lessons during their expansion into space. The corporate wars in the asteroid belt, the colony rebellions, the resource conflicts that had nearly destroyed Mars. They had learned to build weapons that worked, that relied on physics rather than technology, that could be jammed or countered. 48 hours, Chun said quietly. We need to be ready before then. If we refuse their offer, they will attack. And when they do, they need to learn a lesson about underestimating humans. Across New Terra, hidden installations began powering up. Weapons that had remained dormant came online, their targeting systems calibrating against the Valtorian fleet in orbit. Ammunition feeds loaded. Reactor cores reached optimal temperature. And in bunkers scattered across the planet, crews ran through firing sequences they had practiced for months. In orbit, completely unaware, Terex reviewed reports from his intelligence officers. The humans possessed no weapons capable of threatening a Valtorian warship. Their shields could not withstand even a minimal bombardment. The colony would surrender quickly once they understood resistance was futile. The High Commander felt satisfaction at bringing another species under the Empire's guidance. These humans seemed resourceful for primitives. They would make useful subjects once properly educated about their place in the galactic hierarchy. He never considered that humanity's greatest weapon was patience, that they had spent 3 years preparing for exactly this scenario, or that they had intentionally shown him only what they wanted him to see. The 48 hours passed. Chun delivered humanity's answer in the same council chambers where Terex had made his offer. The people of New Terra respectfully declined the Valtorian Empire's protection. Chun stated formally, "We intend to remain an independent human colony." Terex's expression hardened. The pleasant diplomatic mask fell away, revealing cold certainty beneath. "Then you have chosen destruction. My fleet will commence bombardment in 6 hours. Use that time to evacuate your civilians if you wish to minimize casualties. The Empire takes no pleasure in unnecessary death. But you leave us no choice." As the Valtorian delegation departed, Vance stood beside Chun, watching their shuttle climb toward orbit. 6 hours, she said quietly. "More than enough time," Chun replied. "Signal all batteries." Authorization code Phoenix 7. Ladies and gentlemen, let us show the Voltorians what obsolete weapons can do. Asterisk. The physics of war. The Voltorian fleet hung in perfect formation above New Terra. 20 warships arranged in a geometric pattern that demonstrated their tactical superiority. High Commander Terex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Radiance. Watching countdown timers marked the final minutes before bombardment would begin. All vessels report ready status, his tactical officer announced. Plasma lances charged. Disruptor arrays at full power. Shields configured for standard defensive operations. Terex nodded, studying the holographic display of New Terra below. The planet looked peaceful, its cities glowing softly in the darkness where night had fallen. Sensor sweeps showed no unusual activity. The human defense installations remained powered but inactive. Perhaps they hoped their surrender would be accepted even now. High Commander, we are receiving a transmission from the surface, the communications officer said. Commander Chun requests to speak with you. Put him through. Chun's face appeared on the main screen. He stood in what looked like a military command center, though Terex noted the primitive nature of the displays and equipment behind him. The human commander looked tired but composed. High Commander Terex, I am making one final appeal. Withdraw your fleet. Leave New Terra in peace. There is no honor in destroying a colony that cannot defend itself against your superior technology. Terex felt a flicker of genuine regret. He had actually grown to respect Chun during their brief acquaintance. The human showed courage, even if it was courage born from ignorance. Commander, you had the opportunity to avoid this outcome. The Empire offered protection and partnership. You chose defiance. Now you will learn the cost of that choice. Evacuate your civilians if you can. You have 1 hour before we begin. We will not evacuate, Sean replied calmly. This is our home. We built it. We will defend it. With what? Your obsolete railguns? Terex shook his head. Commander, please. Do not waste lives on gestures of futile resistance. Chun's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been a smile crossing his face. High Commander, you are right that our weapons are old. But old does not mean ineffective. You made certain assumptions about our capabilities based on what we showed you. That was your first mistake. Before Terex could respond, the transmission ended. The human commander's face disappeared from the screen, replaced by tactical readouts. High Commander, I am detecting power surges across the planet's surface, the sensor officer called out. Multiple locations showing massive energy signatures. Sir, they are powering up weapon systems we did not detect during our survey. Terex felt the first stirring of unease. Specifications? Unknown, sir. The energy profiles do not match any known weapon type in our database. They appear to be electromagnetic in nature, but the power levels are far beyond what we observe in their railgun installations. Reconfigure sensors for deep scan. I want to know exactly what they have down there. The sensor officer worked frantically at his console, but before he could report findings, the tactical display lit up with proximity warnings. Projectiles detected. Multiple launches from surface installations. Tracking ... Tracking. The officer's voice rose in confusion. Sir, velocity reading is 0.15 c. That cannot be correct. Nothing can accelerate solid matter to 15% light speed from a planetary surface. Terex stared at the display, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. 15% light speed. The humans had fired kinetic weapons at relativistic velocities. That was impossible. The engineering required, the power generation, the heat dissipation problems ... time to impact. He demanded. 42 seconds, sir. The projectiles are small, approximately 100 kilograms each. But at that velocity, The tactical officer's hands moved rapidly across his console. Kinetic energy per projectile is equivalent to a thermonuclear device. Sir, our shields are not configured for relativistic kinetic impacts. Reconfigure them now. All ships, evasive action. But 42 seconds was not enough time. The Voltorian fleet began to scatter, their engines burning at emergency power, but they were moving from a static position. The human projectiles had already calculated their trajectories, fired at where the ships would be, not where they were. The first impact struck the destroyer's swift judgment amidships. The tungsten carbide penetrator, traveling at 45,000 kilometers per second, transferred its kinetic energy in a fraction of an instant. The ship's shields, designed to disperse energy weapon strikes across their surface, simply failed. They could not track something moving that fast, could not redirect force that concentrated. The destroyer came apart. Not exploded, but shattered, torn into fragments by forces that exceeded the structural integrity of every material in its construction. 300 Voltorian crew members died before their nervous systems could register what was happening. 5 seconds later, 3 more ships were hit. Then 7 more. The human weapons were firing in calculated waves, each installation sending its projectiles along precisely computed paths. The Voltorian fleet scattered desperately, but every evasive maneuver had been predicted, accounted for in the firing solutions. Terex gripped his command chair as the eternal radiance shuddered from a near miss. A projectile had passed within 500 meters of his flagship, and even that proximity was enough to overload shield generators on the port side. Damage report. Shields at 60%. Port weapons offline. Sir, we have lost 12 ships. 12 ships in 90 seconds. Terex could not comprehend it. His fleet, the pride of the Voltorian Empire, was being destroyed by weapons he had dismissed as primitive. Around him, his crew worked frantically, trying to target the surface installations, but the humans had placed them strategically. Any attempt to bombard the weapons platforms would require lowering shields, and lowering shields in this environment meant death. All ships full retreat, maximum acceleration away from the planet. The surviving Voltorian vessels burned hard, racing away from New Terra at their maximum sustainable speed. But the human weapons continued firing, each installation sending projectiles on trajectories calculated hours in advance. The humans had predicted the retreat, had anticipated the exact vectors the Voltorians would use to escape. The cruiser Luminous Dawn took 2 hits as it accelerated away, breaking apart in a cloud of debris. The battlecruiser Vigilant Shield lost its entire engine section to a projectile that struck at a shallow angle, tumbling the massive ship end over end before secondary explosions tore it apart from inside. Finally, after 12 minutes of sustained fire, the remnants of the Voltorian fleet escaped beyond the range of New Terra's weapons. Of the 20 warships that had begun the engagement, only 6 remained combat-capable. Another 3 limped along with catastrophic damage, their crews abandoning ship into escape pods. The rest were gone, reduced to expanding clouds of wreckage in orbit around a planet that refused to submit. Terex sat in his command chair, staring at casualty reports that seemed unreal. 8,000 Voltorian dead, 11 ships destroyed, the worst military defeat the Empire had suffered in 3 centuries. And it had been inflicted by humans using weapons the galaxy had abandoned as obsolete. Sir, receiving another transmission from Commander Chun. Terex almost refused to accept it, but his duty required him to face this defeat directly. Put him through. Chun appeared on screen again, still standing in his command center. Behind him, Terex could see Colonel Vance and other human officers monitoring their displays with professional efficiency. They had won, and they knew it, but they took no visible pleasure in the deaths they had caused. "High Commander, I am offering you the same choice you offered us," Chun said quietly. Withdraw your remaining forces. Leave New Terra and human space entirely. Do this, and we will not pursue. We will consider this matter settled. You ambushed us, Tarek said, his voice hollow. You deceived us. You showed us inferior weapons and hid your true capabilities. We showed you exactly what we wanted you to see, Chun corrected. You came to our world assuming superiority. You looked at our technology and saw primitives because we did not build weapons the way your empire builds them. That was your error, not our deception. Terex wanted to argue, to protest, but the casualty reports on his own displays made any argument meaningless. The humans had predicted every aspect of the engagement. They had understood how Voltorian shields worked, had identified their weaknesses, and had exploited them with devastating efficiency. How? He asked finally. How did you accelerate projectiles to relativistic speeds from a planetary surface? The power requirements, the thermal stresses. Chun glanced at someone off-screen, and Colonel Vance stepped into view. We spent 3 years solving those problems, she said. Distributed power generation networks, exotic matter cooling systems, electromagnetic coils manufactured to tolerances most species would consider impossible. You assumed kinetic weapons were obsolete because your shields could stop conventional artillery. But we did not build conventional artillery. We built weapons that exploit fundamental physics. At 15% light speed, our projectiles carry enough kinetic energy to overwhelm any defense system designed for energy weapons, she continued. Your shields track threats and respond to them. But tracking something at that velocity requires sensor systems and computational speed your fleet does not possess. You built defenses for the threats you expected, not the threats we could create. Terex absorbed this, understanding finally what had happened. The Voltorians had fought wars for millennia using directed energy weapons. Their entire tactical doctrine, every defensive system, every strategic assumption was built around that paradigm. Humanity had attacked that paradigm at its foundation, using weapons that operated on principles the Voltorians had forgotten to defend against. Will you withdraw? Chun asked. Or do we need to continue demonstrating what our obsolete weapons can do? Terex looked at his tactical display, at the 6 battered ships that remained of his once proud fleet. Pride demanded he continue, but duty to his surviving crew demanded otherwise. They had lost this battle before it began, defeated by their own assumptions and arrogance. We will withdraw, he said finally. The Voltorian Empire will not return to New Terra. You have earned your independence through blood and cleverness. Then go in peace, High Commander. Tell your empire what happened here. Tell them that humanity will defend itself with whatever weapons we choose to build, and that underestimating us is a mistake no one should make twice. The transmission ended. Terex ordered his remaining ships to jump to hyperspace as soon as they cleared the gravity well. Behind them, New Terra hung serene in the darkness, its defense installations already powering down, already returning to their hidden status dot in the command center beneath New Terra's capital. Commander Chun allowed himself to finally relax. Around him, his staff began shutting down combat systems, securing weapons platforms, and preparing damage assessments. They had won, but the cost in Valtorian lives weighed heavily. Colonel Vance approached, her expression thoughtful. They will tell others about this. The entire galaxy will hear about human weapons. Good, Chun replied. Let them hear. Let them know that humanity will not be pushed around, that we will defend ourselves with whatever means we possess. If that makes them cautious about threatening us, so much the better. And if it makes them curious? If other species come looking for these weapons? Chun considered that possibility. It was a risk, certainly, but isolation was also a risk. Humanity needed the galaxy to understand that they were neither helpless nor aggressive, but simply determined to remain free. Then we will meet them honestly, he said finally. We will show them what we have built and explain why we built it. And if they come with hostile intent, they will learn the same lesson the Voltorians learned today. He looked at the main display, showing New Terra's primary settlement. 300,000 people lived there, building lives on a world humanity had claimed among the stars. They deserved protection. They deserved a future free from external domination. Physics does not care about political systems or technological advancement, Chun said softly. Kinetic energy is kinetic energy. Momentum is momentum. The Voltorians forgot that basic truth because they became too focused on sophisticated technology. They thought energy weapons represented the future and kinetic weapons represented the past. But the universe does not work that way. Force equals mass times acceleration. That equation was true 1 billion years ago. It is true today, and it will be true 1 billion years from now. Vance nodded slowly. We did not win because we were more advanced. We won because we understood the fundamentals better than they did. Exactly. And that is a lesson worth teaching the galaxy. Sophistication is not the same as effectiveness. Sometimes the simplest solution, properly executed, is the best solution. Across New Terra, citizens emerged from shelters, looking up at skies that showed no sign of the battle that had just occurred in orbit. They did not yet know the details, did not understand the mathematics that had saved their world. But they understood that they were still free, still independent, still building their future among the stars, and in the debris field slowly dispersing above them. The wreckage of the Voltorian fleet stood as testament to a simple truth. Never assume your enemy is weak simply because they choose different tools. Never mistake different for inferior. And never, ever underestimate humans who have had time to prepare, time to think, and time to turn physics itself into a weapon. The galaxy would learn that lesson. Some through caution and respect. Others, perhaps, through the same hard experience that had cost the Voltorian Empire 11 ships and 8,000 lives. But they would all learn eventually. Humanity had announced itself to the stars, not with words or treaties, but with mathematics, physics, and the undeniable reality that kinetic energy does not discriminate between primitive and advanced. It simply destroys whatever stands in its path. Asterisk.